these 2 week breaks can really feel heavy. The thing, though, that always makes it so much worth it is when we actually get to the chapter, and it is by far worth it to get to the, like, what content we got, like, what exactly we were given this chapter. Heavy. The only thing that I really, like, kind of I wanted that I didn't really get was seeing Suzaku's sword up, but we got enough information about him, as well as stuff from Selene, that I'm very happy. I mean, on top of that, like, we got name techniques from them. Like, from Selene, I was hyped for. Like, Selene having named moves was one of the just general highlights for me of the chapter. Just because I wouldn't have expected that many. And, I mean, we already have 2. And I can really guess that we're going to get way more down the line. These were casual ones, too. We're probably going to get a bigger one next chapter. Just by the way the chapter ended with Selene's eye. I think it'd be really strange for Mishima to end the chapter like that and then not have Selene, like open up the next chapter with some of Selene content showing what exactly she's capable of now that she's got, she's actually fighting seriously. So, clearly I'm very hyped to see how exactly this goes. I was hyped for this chapter in general. Everything about this just got me super amped to talk about the stuff going on. Like I said, like, we did get this information somewhat on Suzaku's magic, and even a sword style. I thought that was really badass. I didn't expect him to have his own named sword style. I thought that was really neat. It actually kind of reminds me of Urza's Belsarian sword, because, she named her sword after her mother, like the name, the dragon that she took, she, quote-unquote, took down. Help with Wendy, and then obviously Irene having a moment of being in control and not being insane that she was able to kill herself. But outside of that, you have Irene, who took on the name of Belsarian, like the dragon, obviously, that she was close to. We saw in her flashback and stuff. So it's cool to see that Suzaku similarly took the respect for the dragon he took down in order to pretty much develop his style. And it makes me wonder if the way that 5th gen works is maybe they're just like a handful of characters that were able to take a dragon down at some point in history. Because the way that Suzaku talks, I'm still wondering if he's going to be one of those characters that's actually way older than what he appears to be. Kind of like, obviously, with Irene. Elisaria still, like, even if he's like 100 plus, he doesn't look 100 plus. Like, at the time of even the flashback, he was an old man. He had the white beard and whatnot. And then we saw him, at the beginning of 100 Years Quest more than 100 years later, and he looks relatively the same. So they can clearly be of a much higher level of age than just the general appearance of what you'd think they might have. And that goes also with the fact that, like, it seems that when they reach a certain level, I would assume the point where they can turn into a dragon, they're not going to really age the same as other people, just because we don't know the full extent of, like, how long dragons in Fairy Tail live, but it's clearly a considerably long period of time. Irene, being 400 plus years old, so not even that, like, look at any of the dragon gods. Even the youngest, Ignia, I really, it's not really confirmed, but it's kind of obvious, just for the fact Alderaan was already asleep for 300 plus years by that point in time, and he was around when Acnologia was doing his thing, and we don't have the exact age of Ignia, but he was definitely going to end up being young when Acnologia was doing his stuff, just from, like, the nature of, being the son of Igneel, and probably not having that much of a span of time otherwise in the series. So, once we get more around Suzaku, like, the aspects about him as a dragon slayer, like, age-wise, and, like, some of his lore and whatnot, I think it's going to really open up a lot of stuff. But we did get information on 5th generation dragon slaying to a degree. We didn't get an outright statement that, like, fully said, like, hey, here's how it works. But enough information that I think we can figure it out. Like, he says that he has the sword style Kurunugi. And when Selene hears the name, she kind of questions. So clearly she knew of that dragon. And Suzaku mentions that that's the dragon that he ended up beating and then consuming Data's power. So I kind of thought that the way that 5th gen was going to work was it's kind of similar to how I think second gen works. I personally believe that second gen, you have your own magic, and then you get a dragon lacrima, and then it kind of intakes it, and you become a dragon slayer of that attribute. That's kind of like what I assumed somewhat of dragon slaying magic at a 5th gen level, or I guess 5th gen tier rather, is that they have their own magic, eat dragon meat, become a dragon slayer of that type. But it seems more of what dragon you consumed is the power you get. Because Suzaku's got the red dragon slaying title, but I'm personally guessing that it has more to do with like his speed and how fast he cuts people down. Because with like how fast Suzaku is, you're really just gonna see that red blur. Like he himself colored red, like with his design, and on top of that, well, I mean, it's very obvious. I don't think we have an official color for how his whole setup is, but I mean, his name Vermilion being color of red dragon slayer, it's obvious. But I would assume that, plus, like, cutting people, and you're going to just, probably the last thing you see is either him or your own blood spraying all over the place. Red Dragon Slayer fits, but we actually get the information on what his Dragon Slaying type is. I thought it was going to just be Red Dragon Slaying, and then it was going to be, a really weird kind of variant, similar to what Stings is as a White Dragon Slayer. But with Suzaku, it's Sword Saint Dragon Slaying magic, which I think is really cool. And it aligns more up with, not more up, but it still lines up with how the Dragon Eaters and Diablos people are. None of them have a elemental attribute. Their attributes are very strange. Like, look at, Kyria, Mad Bull, and stuff. But actually, speaking of Kyria, it's actually really funny because we know that Suzaku is clearly above them and whatnot. Like, he's clearly stronger than the main 3 of the Diablos guild that we've seen the most. But when you look at them, Kyria's is Blade Dragon Slaying magic. Suzaku's is all around a superior version. I really didn't see anything from Kyria that would make me think that hers is better. I don't really think that would be the case at all. But it makes sense, but at the same time, it would be like if you had somebody with silver abilities and then you had gold. And before anyone says, I know there was a part in that Rave Master, but you know what I mean. Somebody just has an outright kind of upgraded version of your abilities. It would be kind of like if you had like if you had rocks, but this other guy's got like diamonds or something. Like, rocks and earth and stuff is still useful, but like when you compare like stuff like the density and strength of a rock versus a diamond, you're gonna get higher end stuff from diamonds and whatnot. But Suzaku did not fail to impress. Like, he did really good in this chapter. I mentioned that like he just needed to land a hit on Selene to really like break expectations of where his power is. He got a slash in, but we know that she wasn't serious. But that level that she demonstrated was still above what Natsu and Urza did. Because, still, again, Natsu was in base, Urza was damaged, and, Suzaku's clearly stronger there, but that move that he did, just his general kind of, like, sword slash, is so fast that, like, Natsu in base couldn't really even see him do anything, and Urza was barely able to see him even do anything. And we know that the Clear Heart armor does increase her speed-based abilities as well. We've seen it makes her go way faster. Like, we've seen many fights where when she puts it on, her speed and her reaction abilities end up going up because it's more of a technique-based thing on top of just like straight attack and speed. But essentially the chapter starts out with that, and Selene casually dodging it, so she just kind of hops over it and like has no problem with Suzaku's first attack. And then she mentions like, oh, you got a sword drawing art. That's pretty interesting. That is one of my favorite sword styles. I just say, like, if I got to look at, like, my favorites, like, the Ultra Great Sword is my favorite. I just love the, the visual setup of some dude with some big-ass fuck-all swords from, like, Guts. But also, when it comes to more Eastern weapons, I really love the whole draw and slash kind of setup. Draw, slash, resheath. I've always thought that was one of the coolest styles, just because it looks badass. But she's like, oh, that's pretty impressive, cool. And then she ends up dropping a technique. She uses she's like, oh, the moonlight shines, and the flames of the gods. And then she uses like this moonlit flame, which is cool because that means she also has various sort of elements with her just being a moon dragon. I'm very curious to the extent of it. But she ends up doing it. Suzaku getting just kind of surrounded by this fire. He ends up just kind of slashing it up. And not only that, you see him slash up the kind of just general moon like energy around it, because it's not just the flames. You also see areas that just looks like, you know, what I would assume is some form of like raw moon energy or something. You know, just the kind of base aspect of Selene's abilities, because she's not using fire. It would be like moon fire or something weird, some kind of additional variation of it. But after that point, she ends up like just looking at like at what he's doing, impressed by what he did. It's like, oh, you know, you cut my flames, cool. But you know, the moon isn't gonna lose like its radiance or brilliance and whatnot. And the way that it's really kind of mentioned and then shown is, even if her attack is chopped up, she can just reutilize it. It would be like if Natsu roared at somebody, and then, you know, you see the roar miss, and then he just like stops roaring. The amount of fire like in that cone is still going, and then he manipulates it into another attack kind of thing. And Selene, being not only a multiple century-year-old dragon, being one of the strongest people in the whole series, with, you know, God-stated significant levels of power. Like when you look at the, you know, this is like where the dragon god stands, and anybody otherwise that would, you know, be a contender for her has also been very broken and powerful outright. The only one, I mean, Mersobi, we didn't get to see him like in his wits, so it's like kind of like we just look at his raw power and like some of his feats and whatnot, like just casually ripping the ocean out of like. Ripping an ocean out and then putting it, like condensing it down and putting it overhead. Like this big weird saucer of water condensed down that he just makes like pressurized beams and stuff. But after that point, she ends up having like all of these, you know, all these moonlit butterflies that are made from the cut attack that Suzaku, you know, dealt with. And she ends up having them all kind of like make this big swirl attack all around it. And that's the one that's doing damage, and we see Suzaku use his sword style, Kurenugi sword drawing art. And from what the fan translations say, this says it's like a like the name of a Mesopotamian underworld. So he essentially has like this like hell style of swordsmanship. I'm guessing that's what the red is and whatnot. And it's not really gone into, but when he uses this attack, Underworld Drop, and I wonder if he's gonna have any dragon slaying moves with it, because he's got the sword style, but is he gonna have like Sword Saint Dragons, you know, blank, you know, whatever the heck he is. Maybe that's like his bigger techniques, and these are just more of the sword techniques. Like he's got, kind of like how Gray has Ice Make, but he also has, you know, he's also got Devil Slaying. Like he doesn't have to use Devil Slaying every single time he does something, but it's just one of those things that we can look at and say like, okay, cool, you know, he can wait to go into that, similar to maybe what Suzaku's doing, who knows. But he ends up cutting the attack up, and in the attack you see like this weird kind of almost smoky kind of black energy. It might be red if it was colored, but like just this weird kind of vague energy around where his attacks were. And then you even on top of that, you see that the moonlight butterflies that he ended up cutting get way darker. Like the color of them just gets way darker. And I personally think that if he's able to do something like that, and then again the visual sign that these moonlight butterflies ended up getting darker, there's probably more to his like his abilities than just like slashing. Because Wendy otherwise would be able to heal Natsu and Urza just fine, especially in Elentier. I feel like there has to be some form of bonus, like something in his abilities that it's like you get cut by him, maybe it just messes with your blood, or it's like a wound that's way harder to heal because dragon slaying magic. Like Wendy, I'm really hoping is able to figure it out, or maybe Irene steps in and then explains. I kind of want Wendy to figure out on her own though, and maybe we get Irene talk about it later. Like the way that I could see that being perfect is because I don't really want Irene just to show up every time and help Wendy and just give her kind of like the knowledge she needs, because it would be kind of unfair. And at the same time, it's just it's weird because it would, you know, I'd say convenient, but it's like it makes sense that Irene would know about a lot of dragons and a lot of information about different dragon types and whatnot. So if she popped up and like was like able to describe it, the way that I see it though is it'd be like Wendy is able to figure out essentially how to do it, and then afterwards Irene shows up, and then when they kind of mention something about it, she's able to say like, oh, that technique belonged to Kurenugi, like a dragon, you know, something lore, he got cut down at some point, or disappeared, and that's where you can kind of connect a little bit of that to Suzaku, because that'd be part of his backstory. But when he ends up getting like a slash on Selene, which is really weird because he's facing her, and then he does like a 160 after that, or sorry, 180, does a slash attack, he's turned around, and then you see on Selene's face, she gets a cut. She just gets one cut, nothing crazy. He died, that's who. But he ended up killing. Magic is pretty much required because of the fact that they, like they have that natural magic resistance with their scale. So I'd be very curious as to how exactly he would have gotten past that if he wasn't already a Dragon Slayer. And I think that would make a lot of sense if he already was a type of Dragon Slayer. Maybe that's his red dragon slaying thing. Like, red dragon slaying is his, like, raw dragon slaying abilities, but the sword and the sword style have to do with, like, the sword saint dragon slaying abilities. You know, it's somewhat still questionable. You know, it's not fully set up and known yet, but it does have a lot of really good info and just general exposition that I was really hyped for. I like that a lot about the chapter, even though like the fight was definitely like the big hype, the ending especially. But the lore and information we got on abilities and stuff about Suzaku, seeing like Selene start to fight Sirius, is like, it was, I would say, just as good as like the fights, because like the fight, normally I would rank big scale information like that over fights, but like this is a big fight that I was super hyped for. These are two characters that I've been excited for since their introduction, and we're seeing them fight. And on top of that, Suzaku put Selene in a spot where we have to see her actually take this somewhat serious. I don't think she's going to go all out in the next chapter, but I think that she's going to end up having just to kind of like, you know, start going with, oh, I have to use name techniques. I have to actually, well, she started using name techniques, serious name techniques, not just dropping an energy attack on them. Because there was no hacks or craziness with her Moonlit Flame or Moonlight Flame or Moonlight Butterflies. They just seem more of the way that they kind of combo together that makes them really good, and then the damage potency, because being able to harm Suzaku would mean that that attack is able to hurt like a high Sprigged level character without any problem. After that point, we're just getting more about the you know, the whole bit on eating the dragons and whatnot. So I really am hoping that we get more exposition on that within this arc. Maybe have Suzaku explain to them like how they got their powers from eating, like how exactly the eating dragons came into their, you know, with their realm of activities within their domain of just like what they aimed for and what they're really doing. Just because eating, you know, like, hey, let's kill and eat some dragons sounds way easier than it really is if you're in the fairy tale world. This isn't like How to Train Your Dragon, where like there are powerful dragons and the characters don't have powers and abilities and whatnot. But we know that like defeating a dragon, it was essentially in their world like defeating like a powerful animal. There wasn't anything that crazy for the most part, like outside like the big gigantic super dragons and stuff. But just like a regular run-of-the-mill dragon, they can potentially kill. Whereas in fairy tale, like it was so much of a problem that it was believed that humans couldn't kill dragons. That's why they needed to invent dragon slaying magic. But Selene is a little bit interested in the fact that he was able to, like, he ate this dragon and gained his abilities. Like, it's sword saint dragon slaying magic is so cool sounding. But when that happens, Selene is clearly hyped, and she's like talking about like, oh, you know, a human eating a dragon, you know, you guys might have to know your place. And you know, she's even saying like, you know, you're gonna eat me as well. But he's like, no, that's only for the guild, like the master, talking about Georg and stuff. So if like Georg ate all of them, would he get all the dragon god's abilities? Because that is a, like, the way that dragon eaters work is a really logical way of how you could power climb really fast if you start. So like, just imagine you start out at the really low dragons, and then ate, you know, just kept beating like as many as you could, gaining their power and abilities, and then you start just kind of climbing the ladder. And you know, like each defeat should make you, like each time you defeat a dragon and consume it, I would assume give you exponential like magic and power increases, make your dragon slaying magic stronger, and then seemingly give you more than one attribute, which is really cool. But Selene is like, okay, I guess it's time for me to fight a little serious. And that's when we got at the end of the chapter. And I'm gonna talk about that in a minute, because it's funny, it doesn't seem like what I initially thought it was, just by the wording. It still could be, like, you know, we don't have the full shown description of how Selene affecting the moon really went, because there's two possibilities of it. Anyway, once they're running away from the, like, Mimi and Hakune, you have Toka end up using Aqua Era and saving them, like, kind of pulling them over. And at that point, like, they're gonna take it. They're in a dire situation. They don't have a lot of options, and they already know that Ferris is somewhat on their side to a degree. Once they get away, Mimi and Akune are like, oh, we got to figure out something. Like, they got to wait. Somehow, for whatever reason, Mimi can smell really well. I'm kind of wondering if, like, with her ability, whatever her spiritual art is, if, like, all her base human aspects are just kind of advanced. Like, stronger, more durable, all of her 5 senses are increased. I mean, that's cool, but at the same time, I really want something more out of Mimi, because her abilities are fun to watch, and there's usually like a silly one in their group, but when you look at the other comedic characters, like Kane Hikaru, you look at like Fran Moth, you look at somebody like Jacob, they have powerful abilities to match up with their tier, like with their whole setup, when you have a comedic bad guy. And it's not as comparable to something like Ichia, because Ichia is obviously a protagonist, not an antagonist. But she's able to pretty much figure out what direction they went by smell, and she picks up Hakune, and Hakune's like, oh, I'm being carried kind of like a princess. And there's the line that was really confusing to me when she's like, don't be sure of that, the princess hears me. I'm wondering if that was a joke, or there's more context to that, if there's anything beyond what exactly we have, like, with her. Like, for a while, I was thinking, like, what if she's also a dragon that just shapeshifts? But at the same time, it's like, well, then she would have used some of her abilities, or Natsu would have smelled her, so I don't really think that's a likely scenario. Like, she just seems to have some form of really weird spiritual art that, like, I am very hyped to see, like, how exactly it's described. There's a lot of just general information pieces I can't wait to get to, like, obviously, like, how Gray overcomes Hakune, whatever Gray's transcendent magic is. That's one of my big hypes for this arc, and just seeing how exactly he's going to, like I said, overcome her abilities and defeat her at some point. But following that, we have back at the Whiteout Village, the Grand Whiteout Priestess. She's like, oh, who are you guys? And Ferris is like trying to figure out what's going on. I think she relatively knows what's going on, but she knows, like, Natsu and Urza are all kind of slashed up. And they're like getting bandages and medicine and stuff. And Wendy goes to try and heal him. And there's nothing that really stops her. But personally, I think that there has to be something more of more of Suzaku's sword and abilities than just he just cut them. Because if they just got cut, Wendy should have zero problem really healing her, or healing both of them rather. Just because, like, we know where her abilities were already at. We saw her, like, fast heal Ferris at the start of the arc from that blast that Selene did, like, right to her gut. So I personally believe there has to be some extra trait to what it is. And I mentioned earlier, what I kind of want it to be like is if, like, Wendy figures out what the problem is, but maybe doesn't understand it entirely. Like, she figures out there's, like, some form of dragon slaying ability that prevents them from healing, and figures out a way around it. And then afterwards, you can have Irene do, like, an info dump, kind of, like, talk about Kurenugi at some point. While they're doing all that, you have Mimi and Hakune just kind of pop up. They're like, hey, just slam the door. Hey, what's up, guys? We got this. And that's when we get to the end of the chapter. When they're getting ready to be, like, figure out what they're going to do. It gets way brighter. You can see the light behind them starting to grow in the doorway behind Hakune and Mimi. And then you see the moon just gigantic behind them. It's huge. Way bigger. You can go back to looking at this arc at any time that there's a moon on screen. And it looks relatively like if you had real life, like a full moon outside. But this thing is massive, and there are two ways that can go with it, because, like, they're mentioning in this, like, oh, Selene is getting serious, like somebody managed to actually get her serious, and there's a part with Lucy when there's like, oh, the size of the moon changes when she gets serious. So there's two things about that. There's what I initially thought was her pulling the moon down, kind of doing some Majora's Mask move, or if she's actually just what I think would otherwise, until shown wrong, is that she just made the moon bigger somehow. And it's funny because, like, I thought, like, pulling the moon down is really impressive. It's obviously, like, a really impressive ability to move that much, move that much weight and mass and stuff. But if she is manipulating the moon to be like as many sizes bigger as it was, then that's way more impressive. Because really, when you think about, like, how much closer that thing would have to be, how much bigger would the moon have to be from its position to look that much larger? Like, it's huge in the panel. Like, it looks like if you were there and just, like, look straight up at it would take up, like, a majority of the horizon. It just looks ginormous. So Now, I'm not talking about like if the moon fully got lowered. I'm talking about just if you looked up and you would just see some of the sky around it. You'd mostly just see this big ass moon. So I was expecting the way this chapter would really go is it would do Suzaku versus Selene, do some stuff on that, and setting up the fights with Lucy Gray against Mimi and Hakune. I assume singular matches for them for their respective people, but like the whole aspect at the very end where we see Selene's eye right after she ends up pulling the moon. It makes me think the next chapter is going to also show exactly what she's doing. We're not going to have to wait and wait another 2+ weeks after this next chapter to see exactly what this ability does. It reminds me a lot like you just think back at when Alderon's like, oh, maybe I'll use the Thicket of Arms, or maybe like when Natsu fought Zero and we saw Genesis Zero getting prepped and ready to go, but we had to wait until a further chapter to find out where exactly that went, what exactly kind of like went along with that with that ability. But like this whole setup, it really makes me assume that the next chapter is going to open like showing the ability, whatever Selene is going to do. Because like Mishima loves to leave stuff up on cliffhangers, and generally when he ends a chapter like the way he did, it's so you could be hyped to how the next one's going to open. I think it'd be really weird for him to end the chapter that way and then not show any further progress of what's going on between Suzaku and Selene outside of it. Like if we just somehow went full focus on the fights with Mimi, Hakune, and Gray and Lucy. They're important, and I definitely want to get to theirs, but I really want to see what exactly Selene's ability does, like what this technique kind of, is going to roll out and do whenever she gets like the full on-screen chance to demonstrate it. That's going to be super hype. But, like, the amount of energy and flex it would take to make the moon that much bigger is ridiculous. I can't wait to get to the next chapter. This was a really hype one for me. Everything within this chapter really kind of like hit my check boxes. The only thing that like I didn't get was like it was just not seeing what Suzaku's sword looked like unsheathed. But at the same time, I got so much stuff that I think fully counterweighted over it. Like I was hoping for more of a Suzaku set. We just still got some stuff from Suzaku that was really cool, like the sword style. But the information we got from him was the best part from him, at least for me in the chapter, from his stance. Like Selene was my favorite part of the chapter overall, but if I was gonna say that Selene, besides Selene rather, what was the other like kind of like big thing for me this chapter? It would definitely have to do with Suzaku just giving us some information on like how he got his dragon slaying abilities, eating the Sword Saint Dragon, gaining Sword Saint Dragon slaying magic. It's just a really cool like bit to be able to kind of tack that onto 5th gen and then like try and figure out how they all work. Because there's still details about 5th gen we don't know. Like we still barely know anything about 4th gen because it was only in the one movie. But Selene is just doing everything she can to keep her hype and position going. She is absolutely running this thing right now, run the show, and keeping her keeping her flex on. Like she's been ridiculous, and I can't wait to see exactly how her more serious side goes. Like what is she gonna do in like the next time we see her fight? Is she gonna be like shooting giant cosmic moonbeams? Is she gonna do something really just outright broken? Like assuming that this moon is at least somewhat similar to the Fairy Tail moon, it would have like dispelling abilities like on top of that. There would be ways for her to kind of just like nope anything that Suzaku did, except for maybe like his sword. But I don't really see what he's gonna do with that. Like when you look at this chapter and compare Suzaku, who was trying to go for the kill, I doubt he's going all out like before he was his Dragon Force. Like we know that he's not like with Diablos, they're forbidden to use Dragon Force, and Suzaku definitely seems like one of those guys that isn't going to break the rules of his guild. He clearly has a high respect for his guild as well as the members of his guild, because one of the things he was clearly beefed with about like Fairy Tail and stuff is they hurt people within his guild. So Suzaku got hit and he took way more damage than like Selene. Selene got a cut. Suzaku has a lot of that, manga, anime, I got damaged, but it's not like I'm covered in blood or I, missing limbs or whatever. It's just all those tons of scrapes and damage to show that he, he took some damage. And Selene was fighting casually, whereas Suzaku was fighting seriously. I would assume he's got more stuff up his sleeve, but the gap of just like where he was to casual Selene was crazy. And we see Selene getting serious near the end. You know, you got this panel right here. And it's just going to be so much fun. I can't wait to figure out what exactly this ability does. Maybe we'll get more techniques from Suzaku next chapter and find out just like a little bit more about Red Dragon slaying magic and what it has to do with like this whole underworld sword style that he's pretty much setting up. Like, it's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be like a big hype chapter. I definitely can say I can wait for that chapter a lot more than this chapter. Because this chapter had a lot of stuff that I had been like highly anticipating since this arc started, and we've got like people like Selene. Even before that, because Suzaku showed up a little bit before Selene back in like chapter 63. So yeah, 100 Years Quest was super hyped this week, super solid. It was great. I loved all the scenes. Even like Mimi and Hakune, who like, I mean, like Mimi did stuff, but like Mimi's was cool and impressive. So I'm not gonna really kind of downplay her that much. I'm just hoping that whatever her spiritual art is, when we get it explained, is going to be better than just like she has super physical strength and like what like high senses of smell and whatnot. Maybe just like heightened senses. Like I've got my money and hopes that she ends up having something more busted. And I'm very curious still what she meant when she was like saying, "Oh, the princess is me." Is she like actually revealing some form of kind of quiet plot device, or not plot device, kind of like plot point? Or is she just kind of talking? Is she just saying words? You know, and it has to do with her personality. So, comment below. Tell me your thoughts were about this chapter and what you were most hyped about. Like for me, like I said, I was stoked the second we got into it. We had that first opening page where it's like them kind of just eyeing each other up. Suzaku going in for an attack, and Selene not really taking him that seriously, and then like she didn't decide to actually fight until he got a cut on her, and now she's like, all right, cool, what? And then he just looks at her and is like, okay, what's your first move? And she's just like, hey, look up, and there's the moon. Just regardless if it's pulling down or she just make it bigger, both are insane. I think I might just go with the making it bigger, just because of the fact that it doesn't look like there were no speed lights or anything to indicate it was falling. But I mean, like, it still easily just be like the way that the panel was drawn. But I mean, like, if Selene is just making the moon bigger, that's ridiculous. That would be insane if she's like just like amassing the size of the moon. It would be multiple times over, just based on the fact that we would see it at that distance, but you know, it would be so much bigger. So I would assume that the size of the moon would be exponentially bigger than where it started. Just when you think about like, oh, how far they're both the same distance away, but one is clearly way bigger than the other, just by looking at like where you are in your point of view and whatnot, your perspective of where you stand in comparison to it. So other than that, comment below, thumbs up the video, friend, like, and subscribe button, and check out my other videos. Also, I'm still, again, so happy Selene is being very active in this arc. It's great. It gives me such a happy time to see her regularly interact with like the characters and step out and do stuff. Because like you can have a character do the opposite and be really cool. Like Hades went out once before his fight, stomped Makarov, went back to his ship, and kind of just hung out, and then waited for the Fairy Tail members to get there. But with Selene, she's like, why would I wait? I'm just going to go do it. And she's not trying to kill them, but she's having fun. She's just enjoying herself. And like I said, comment below, thumbs up the video, friend, like button, subscribe, and check out my other videos. For that, I appreciate everybody's already subscribed. I thank you all for listening.